everyone. Welcome to a special series, literary music series. My name is Mackenzie Melemed. I hope that everyone is able to hear me. I'm sure I'll get some feedback. I'm calling in, video chatting in from Finland. I recently received a residence visa in the mail to my apartment in New York City. Oops. Volume is a little low. I don't know why. Because typically it's very loud. So I will adjust it a little bit more. Maybe now it's a little bit better. I hope it's not boomy. But yes, I have a... Okay, great. Wonderful. Natalie Nedvetsky has been my friend since my undergraduate years at Juilliard, and I'm so thrilled that she has created a series that connects the performing arts to so much else. I think with performing arts and visual arts and literary arts as well. I loved reading poetry when I was younger and didn't really have a knack for writing this flowing, some beautiful and painful words. They didn't necessarily flow out of me the way that music does and the way that I connect with music. But having learned so much music and now coming to Finland, I can really see the connections between artists of all types, whether they're painters. I recently visited the art museum in Turku and got a very good idea here in Finland what Finnish art is like on paper, with canvas, through poetry, through epic storytelling, which is some of what I'm going to read tonight, and also through wonderful piano music and orchestral music as well. We have composers like Jean Sibelius, Selim Palmgren, also Oscar Maricanto, Are Maricanto. It's a wonderful and quite unknown part of the music world that I think when people think of Finland, they might think of Sibelius, and his symphonies are very popular, but he's got a lot of piano music, and have been very recently invited to perform a recital of all Sibelius music, so I'm really getting into not only Finnish piano music, but the whole atmosphere and living here as well. So I've only been here for 2 weeks. I've finished my quarantine, but I'm already getting a sense of what's going on. Don't know how much more the volume can go. I have everything up. It's very, very interesting. But hopefully everyone can replay this and hear it even louder, maybe with their own speakers. So I'm doing this kind of makeshift thing. I have a keyboard here, and so I'll try to give you a little bit of insight into the Finnish language and also Finnish poetry and the connection between the two that I've noticed in my short time here. I've been to Finland about 20 times, and I've learned the language, so it's helped me a little bit. Yeah, Zach, I don't really know. The Blue Yeti I've been using and teaching lessons and everything has been fine, but since I went away to Helsinki for a couple days, everything has kind of fallen apart here. So I've been researching a little bit about poetry from Finnish composers and Finnish poets, and one thing that has stood out to me was, of course, in Finnish class we learn about this epic novel called the Kalevala, which takes place in Karelia, which is basically the easternmost portion of Finland, and it used to be Finland, but now part of Russia. So Finland is famous for their Karelian pies, which is a rice pastry that we eat for breakfast. And this region was where the Kalevala, these stories were based upon. And it's all kind of like the equivalent of the Nordic mythology with Odin and that kind of almost Lord of the Rings, type novels. And the Lord of the Rings was actually based a little bit on the Finnish language, the language that they use. J.R.R. Tolkien was really really fascinated with Finland. So this mythology aspect as well is something that's very prominent in Finland. And the Kalevala is their version of maybe the Iliad and the Odyssey that the Greeks have. It's all of the story of war and magic and mystery and love and these kind of typical ideas that we feature in our big stories. So the national epic is called the Kalevala, and there were stories that were written over a long period of time. And Elias Lönnrot was the compiler of these stories into poems, and the poems were organized in a set of runes, runes, and each rune is a different story. I believe there are almost 50 of them, and there are different stories for each rune. So I wanted to read the opening, just a little bit of it. It's not very long. A lot of rhyming, you'll notice in these. This is the opening part of the Kalevala, which is what I remember from school. It reminds me a little bit of the opening call to the muse in Greek mythology, or in Shakespeare, actually. "Oh muse, give me the strength to write this story about these great characters, these great warriors, these great heroes, and these legends." So this opening kind of incantation sets the field and introduces the characters. And so I'm going to read it in English, and I'm also going to read it a little bit of it in Finnish, so that you also get to hear the language and the double consonances, the double vowels that are used, and a little bit about the meter. So the meter for the Kalevala is something called, it's tetrameter, and basically you have the accent on the first syllable and not on the second syllable. So a lot of Finnish is ba, 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 ba. So there's always the accent on the first syllable of the word. Here we go. Mastered by desire impulsive, by a mighty inward urging, I am ready now for singing, ready to begin the chanting of our nation's ancient folk song, handed down from bygone ages. In my mouth the words are melting. From my lips the tones are gliding. From my tongue they wish to hasten, when my willing teeth are parted, when my ready mouth is opened. Songs of ancient wit and wisdom hasten from me not unwilling. Golden friend and dearest brother, brother dear of mine in childhood, come and sing with me the stories, come and chant with me the legends, legends of the times forgotten. Since we now are here together, come together from our roamings, seldom do we come for singing, seldom to the one the other, o'er this cold and cruel country, over the poor soil of the Northland. Let us clasp our hands together, that we thus may best remember. Join we now in merry singing, chant we now the oldest folklore, that the dear ones all may hear them, that the well-inclined may hear them, of this rising generation. These are words in childhood taught me, songs preserved from distant ages, legends that they once were taken, from the belt of Väinämöinen, from the forge of Ilmarinen, from the sword of Kaukomieli, from the bow of Joukahainen, from the bow, from the pastures of the Northland, from the meads of Kalevala. These my dear old father sang me, when at work with knife and hatchet. These my tender mother taught me, when she twirled the flying spindle, when a child upon the matting, by her feet I rolled and tumbled. So basically it goes on and on to say that the idea is that these stories were passed down from generation to generation, and there are many, many different characters, as there were at least 10 main characters in this national epic. And each character has their kind of own, basically the same kind of character, but the stories are slightly different and the characters find themselves in different situations, and but typically they are described as looking the same, generally having the same type of character. They're coming from the same place, they have the same desires, intuitions, but they're not always exactly 100%, because I think of this generation to generation dialogue that happens, passing it from generation to generation kind of changes it, and it's almost like playing telephone, where you'll tell a story and it comes eventually and you get almost all of it, but there are some things that transform, and that's kind of the nature of the oral storytelling tradition. So now I'm going to read the same thing, but in Finnish. Just a little bit of the opening, so you can hear a little bit of the rhyming. Mieleni minun tekevi, aivoni ajattelevi, lähteäni laulamahan, saani sanelamahan, sukuvirtaa suoltamahan, lajivirtaa laulamahan. Sanat suussani sulavat, puheet putoilevat, kielelläni kerkiävät, hampahielleni hajoavat. Velikulta veikoseni, kaunis kasvin kuppalini. Lähde nyt kanssa laulamahan, saakera sanelamahan. Yhtehen yhtyämme, kahta alta käytyämme. Harvoin yhtehen yhme, saamme toinen toisihimme. Näillä raukoilla rajoilla, poloisilla Pohjanmailla. Lyökäämme käsi kätehen, sormet sormien lomahan. Laukoaksemme hyviä, parahia pannaksemme. Kulla nojen kultaisien, tietää mieli toisien. Nuorisossa nosevassa, kansassa kasvavassa. Noita saamia sanoja, virsiä virittämiä vyöltä, vanhan veinamoisen. Alta aihon ilmarisen, päästä kalvan kaukomielen, joukahaisen josen tiestä, pohjan peltojen periltä. Kalevalan kankahilta, niit ennen isoni lauloi kirvesvarta vuolessansa. Niitä äiti opetti vääteisensä vartinätä, minun lasna lattialla, essä polven pyöriessä. Maitopartana pahaisna, piimasuuna pikkaraisna. So that's a little bit that you can see. It's a very interesting kind of singing language once you get the hang of it. This is very old Finnish. The 1800s, the 19th century Finnish has really, the modern Finnish has changed a lot from this time, and so it's hard for me, even though I can read anything in modern Finnish quite easily. A lot of the words here are tough. They're actually longer than normal, and quite difficult and a little bit complicated to get out in a poetic way, actually. So some of the raitiolta ratkomia paimenessa käydessäni, it's a little bit easier to say than something like väätessänsä varti nätä. It's a little difficult, especially with juggling those umlauts. A, and U sounds are a little bit more challenging than others. There's one character that's inspired Sibelius to write a series of 3 pieces about, and this character is a girl. Her name is Kyllikki, and mostly she's referenced as dancing around in the Kalevala. In one story, she does a lot of dancing, and so I think I'm gonna play the last movement of this Kyllikki suite, and you can hear this jaunty, very uplifting character of Kyllikki. And Sibelius didn't really mean to make this programmatically based on the Kalevala story, but I think the character, which has been passed down from generation to generation, as I said, is something that's really important and is more about the character than the actual story itself. What is the essence of this person within the framework of this huge epic story, with many different regional dialects creating lots of change to the story. So depending on how you hear it and which region you're from, you might interpret it differently based on the lifestyle that you had, and so it's very interesting. It's a very alive type of history, especially around the Kalevala. So I'm going to move the mic and the camera, and you'll see here. Alright, it should be working quite well, I hope. The one thing I forgot to bring is my Bluetooth pedal, so I have to switch it by tapping, so I hope that won't bother anyone too much. So that's just a little bit from Sibelius's Kyllikki Suite, and you can hear the character of Kyllikki from the Kalevala. It's not particularly based on it, but just the overall character that you get when you're reading this. It's kind of like a feeling, almost an impressionistic view of a character. You just kind of get an inkling, and it's just kind of a sketch. And Sibelius wrote a lot of short pieces, much more than he wrote these massive pieces. He didn't really write anything truly that long for piano. He arranged the Finlandia, which is an orchestral piece, which is about 7-8 minutes. He also wrote a piano sonata, but all of those movements are very short, and I'm going to play another short piece for you after this. I was looking, of course, one of the most famous poets from Finland is a poet by the name of Eino Leino, a very poetic name, Eino Leino, E-I-N-O, L-E-I-N-O. Eino Leino was born around the time of this general shift towards nationalism. Finland really wanted to become independent. You know, it had been run by Sweden, run by Russia, over hundreds of years, and they had their own unique identity, and they wanted to become their own autonomous country. And so that happened in 1917. So around this time, people were, oops, so let's see what's going on. Around this time, people were really getting revved up about the opportunity that Finland might become its own country. They really wanted to write towards independence. And so these composers like Jean Sibelius, this is late 1800s to middle of the 20th century. So around their 30s, you know, Eino Leino, Jean Sibelius, Selim Palmgren, another wonderful composer, which I'm going to play a short piece by him right now. They all were kind of around the same idea, around the same ideals. And so they wrote music that reflected the beauty and the wonder of Finland, whether it was the forest, the despair of the very cold and harsh winters that the Finnish people experience. My first winter will be coming, I'm sure, very soon. We're going to have a week of rain, and then maybe the cold weather is going to be coming even in September. I don't really know, but I'm getting excited for it. So, you know, just the daily life and the hardships and the celebrations of Finnish people is something really important around the turn of the 20th century. So one of his poems is called Nocturne, and I'm going to read it. It's quite short in Finnish and in English. So first, I'll read it in English and then Finnish. The corncrake's song rings in my ears. Above the rye, a full moon sails. This summer night, all sorrow clears, and wood smoke drifts along the dales. I do not laugh or grieve or sigh. The forest's darkness breathes nearby, the red of clouds where day sinks deep, the blue of windy hills asleep. The twin flower scent, the water's shade, of these my heart's own song is made. You, girl as sweet as summer hay, my heart's great peace I sing to you. O my devotion, tune and play, a wreath of oak twigs green and new. I have stopped chasing jack-o'-lantern. I hold gold from the demon's mountain. Around me life tightens its ring, time stops, the vein has ceased to swing. The road before me through the gloom is leading to an unknown room. Now this translation is quite nice because they also do sails, dales, ears, clears, sigh, nearby. So they did the rhyming that happens in the Finnish language. I think it's quite tough to match them up. So now here it is in Finnish. Ruisliinun laulu korvissani, tähkäpäiden päällä täysikuu. Kesäyön on onni omanani, kaskisavun laaksot verhoo. En mä iloitse, en sure huokaa, mutta metsän tummus mulle tuokaa. Puuntopilven, johon päivä hukkuu, Sintovaaran tuulisen niin nukkuu. Tuoksut vanamon ja varjot veen, niistä sydämeni laulun teen. Sulle laula neiti, kesäheinä, sydämeni suuri hiljaisuus. Uskontoni soipa säveleinä, tamman lehvä seppel vehryt uus. En mä enää aja virvatulta, onpa kädessäni onen kulta. Pienentyy mun ympär elon piiri. Aika seisoo, nukku tuuliviiri. Edessäni hämäräinen tie, tuntemattomahan tupaan vie. A little difficult, some of those things. Most of it, actually, since it's getting to 20th centuries, I can understand maybe half of it, but some of it gets a little bit tough. So this one was called Nocturne, and now I'm going to play Nocturne, which is a three-part piece. I learned the first part. It's beautiful. It's called The Stars Are Twinkling, and you really can see the stars twinkling almost every night when it's clear because of the lack of light pollution, especially for sitting in your summer cottage by the lake. And Helsinki is only about 5 to 10 miles of real lots of houses, and then the rest of the country you have a few bigger cities, but the light pollution is pretty low. I would consider it, something like Kansas or even less maybe. So something like in the mountains of the Denali National Park almost, or Yellowstone or something similar, like rural Wyoming. So it's very beautiful here, and you really can see the stars twinkling. So this is a nocturne now by Selim Palmgren, who was a Finnish composer. His name sounds Swedish because he was born on the western side of Finland, about an hour and a half from here, in a town called Pori, P-O-R-I. And I had the great opportunity to play his second piano concerto called The River, which was based on the river that runs through Pori. And if you ever come to Finland, you should definitely visit Pori, because there is this beautiful, very fine sand beach called Yyteri, which is Yyteri. And if you look it up, it's one of Finland's best and only real resort beaches. So this is the nocturne by Palmgren. So that was the nocturne, the first part of it, called Stars Are Twinkling, or in Finnish we say Tähdet tuikkivat. It's kind of a tuikki. Tuikki is twinkling. So a lot of the words, you can almost guess their meaning in Finnish. A lot of times I don't really know what a verb might mean, and it might be something like starta. Starta is to start something. It's obviously been taken from English, but a lot of stuff comes from Swedish and German. And then some stuff just I have no idea where they got it. So it's kind of fun. And when you hear the language and you hear kind of the way that it goes, almost if you listen to an opera like Jenufar or something by Janacek, really you can hear that these kind of bizarre rhythms that you don't really hear the typical Mozart or Puccini rhythms, but you hear something a little more primitive, and it follows the accents of the language. A lot of times Hungarian and Finnish, which are a little bit related, there's always this heavier accent on the first syllable. So hauska päivä is like good day, or hyvä päivä, hyvä päivä. Mitä kuuluu? Mitä kuuluu? So how are you doing? Mitä kuuluu? It's actually poetic in itself, and so the music kind of follows that a little bit and follows the poetry as well. So there's a connection already between the language and the poetry. A really nice guy that when I was looking up Eino Leino to read a little bit about his poetry, because I didn't know really too much, I found my friend Jani Lansia, who is the producer with the Helsinki Philharmonic and writes program notes very, very, very beautifully. He says, Leino's poetry was born during the golden age of Finnish art, music, and in the heyday of the national will for independence. Basically what I said. The composers Jean Sibelius, Oscar Merikanto, Heino Kaski, Selim Palmgren, Toivo Kuula, Erkki Melartan, and Ilmari Hannikainen, all of the dates born around 1860 to 1880 and died around all the same time between 1940 and 1960. They depicted the Finnish soulscape together with painters and writers, kind of like for a common goal, writing, painting, composing. And the Finns' identity based on forest, soil, and ice-covered lakes grew stronger and stronger. Even so, Finnish composers did not just wander down forest paths for inspiration. They also gained influences from the world and made them part of their own national romantic style. There was a neo-romantic style. And even Sibelius, who was so close to nature, had two interconnected roles that fed each other. He was a cosmopolitan composer of great tone poems, symphonies. He felt at home. He was good friends with Ferruccio Busoni. Busoni had come to Finland on a number of occasions to meet him. But, Sibelius had been to Paris, Berlin, Vienna, the big cities. But on the other hand, if you've been to Finland and you've been to his home in Järvenpää called Ainola, it's just this little kind of cottage in the middle of a pasture. And he really liked it best here, which is in the shelter of a forest, and it was on the shore of a lake. So his depictions of nature, I don't think really would sound the same without his experience of the contrast of seeing the big cities of Europe and returning home to really appreciate what was in his backyard, and even a little bit of appreciating the hardships of what they go through. And so his music, his series on trees, he wrote a lot of music about trees, and I want to play for you the last piece, a little romantic work from his 5 romantic pieces. It's called A Romantic Scene, but really it reminds me so much of just the Finnish countryside. And I was biking the other day, and I just kind of saw the picturesque scene, but also when the fall comes and when the winter comes, and it gets very gray for many, many months. But it's still such a beautiful scene to look outside and see the kind of rolling fields and the trees, which will of course be covered in snow, and a little red house in the background. And it's been really inspiring for me, especially for my music, but also to understand a little bit deeper this music that doesn't get played so often, and looking past the simplicity to see the depth and the intimacy that he gets in his writing. And I think it's something that you really need to be here to see and experience and feel that connection with the music. So I'm going to read one poem before I start. It's called Elegy also by Eino Leino. You find it here. Oops. Sorry, here. Where are you? Sorry, I had it. Here we go. I'll read a little bit in Finnish. Haihtuvituvi nuoruus, niin kuin vierivä virta. Langat jo harmat lyö, elän kultainen pirta. Turhaan, oi turhaa, tartun mä hetkehen kiinni. Riemua ei suo rattoissa seuraa, ei viini. Häipyvä taakse tahtoni ylpeät päivät. Henkeni hurmat ammoin jo jälkehen jäivät. Notkasta nousin, tasko on painua tieni. Toivoni aino, tuskataan tuokio pieni. Tiedän mä, rauha mulle on mullassa suotu. Etsien tielle ei lepolempia luotu. Pohjoinen puhuu, myrskyhyn aurinko vaipuu. Jää punajuova. Kauneuden voimaton kaipuu. Upposi mereen unteni kukkivat kunnat. Mies olen köyhä, kallit on laulajan lunnat. Kaikkeni annoin, hetken mä heiloa jaksoin. Kaavehen kullat, mieleni murheella maksoin. Uppunut olen, sydän juurihin saakka. Liikaakko lienee pantukin paatinen taakka. Tai olen niitä, joilla on tahto ei voima. Voitoni tyhä, tuon tulos tuntoni soima. Siis oli suotta kesketyt, vaikeat vaivat, katkotut kahlet, poltetut, rakkahat laivat. Nytkä mä kaaduin, kun olin kaikkeni tarpeen, jäämätön jääksi, kun menee haaveni arpeen. Toivoton taisto taivan, valtoja vastaan. Kaikuvi kannel, lohdutta laula ei lastaan. Hallatar haastaa, soi sävel sortuvin siivin. Rotkoni rauhan, kuin peto kuoleva hiivin. So it's lots of rhyming and beautiful, and you can hear that there's a very clear distinction between 1K, 2Ks, ukko, sometimes 2 U's, ukko, and 1K, or 2 U's and 2Ks, ukko. So when you have two syllables, two consonants together, it's not ukko, it's ukko. So it's a soft K, soft T's, utto, uppo, ullo. So that's very soft, whereas I think in English we would go uppo or uppo when we would have a double letter. So it's really, really interesting and goes quite well together. So with that elegy by Eino Leino, I will play a short piece, the ending work from his 5 romantic pieces, Opus 101 by Jean Sibelius, and it's called Romantic Scene. And I'm guessing that he wrote it when he was abroad in Paris as the 5 scènes romantiques. So we have 5 romantic scenes or romantic pieces, and it was published and printed in French. So I hope you have enjoyed learning a little bit, hearing the Finnish language, hearing about the Kalevala and the characters and the importance of the idea of the character and what they stand for, and the kind of coming together, the melding and kind of combining the forces of this early turn of the century artist pact, almost, that they really wanted to coalesce in the same types of ideas of independence, really featuring the strengths of Finland, the wonderful forest, the thousands of lakes. It's like a Minnesota. That's why Finnish people, when they came to the US, they came to Minnesota, because it was much like Finland. Very cold in the winter and lots of water. So if you go to Minnesota, you can go to the town of Suomi, which is Finland. And so they really combined all of their efforts, and you can really see it, and you can see the friendships that have developed between them, and it's very evident in the poetry and in the music. So I will end with this, and thank you for joining me this afternoon from the United States. And from here, it's nearly 11 o'clock at night, about 7 hours ahead of New York City. I would actually like to play one more piece for you. It's by Oscar Americanto. It's one of the most famous pieces in the Finnish music literature. It's a very short piece, and it's called Valse Lent, the slow waltz. And the host family that I'm staying with, who's basically letting me live here and move keyboard and kind of make my own studio to teach. They're so incredibly generous and loving, and their grandfather, my pen pal's grandfather, loved this song by Oscar Americanto, this slow waltz. And with that, that's all from me this evening from Western Finland. But thank you so much for joining in. I really hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about, again, the Finnish culture and the link between the poetry and the music. And please, if you haven't already, please support Natalie and the Literary Music Series on their GoFundMe page, which is right in the comments section or in the description of this video, and support generously so that we can continue to share the vital connections between the art forms, not the performing arts, the visual arts, the literary arts. I think poetry is such an important part of the art world, and together with music, things just make so much more sense, I think. If we really think about it, especially in Finland, it's a wonderful example of how artists really united a nation and created a path for Finland to have its own unique identity, and really capitalized on the wonderful things that make Finland what it is today. So thank you again for joining, and have a wonderful rest of your day, and watch this later if you want to hear again some wonderful Finnish music and to hear a little bit of a new strange language that you might not hear every day of the week. So thanks again, and everyone be well and stay very safe.